Hello, I'm Dan Cervantes, co-founder of Harmonic, and you're watching Coefficient, our series where we speak with artists and creative businesses that are trying to better strike a balance between artistry and commerce, because so often those two things are in competition or they're just out of whack. There's no one better to speak to this than Lucie Watson, who is our guest this week. Lucie is the founder of goodtwin, a label services company that specializes in bringing artists from New Zealand and Australia to the UK, specifically London, and helping them get started in such a competitive market. And in the process of doing that, she's really faced with these much bigger questions about what it means to have a sustainable career as an artist and dealing with things like streaming services that don't pay much and trying to build community and figure out who your true fans are. We talk about all of that and more in this episode. It's a really great interview, so I'm not going to spend any more time introing it. Here it is, Lucie Watson. Lucie, thank you so much for joining us today. You're the founder of goodtwin. You're on the other side of the pond from us. Maybe we could start this off with you just giving us a kind of brief background on who you are and what you're doing with goodtwin.
Sure. I've been living in London for the last 12 years from New Zealand originally. And when I moved over here in 2014, I was writing for a music blog and ended up meeting my old boss, Denzel Flegelston, who's had an incredible career in the industry. And together we worked on a project for the launch of Apple Music. And then off the back of that, started a label services company called Platoon, which at its time was quite disruptive because there weren't too many label services companies yet on the market. Now they're absolutely everywhere. And it just so happened that it was right time, right place. The first artists we worked with were Billie Eilish and Georgia Smith and Rex Orange County and Yebba and Victoria Monet, and just a run of really, really incredible artists that really put us on the map. And then in 2018, that company got acquired by Apple. So we became an Apple company. And at the end of 2023, after I had my second baby, I decided to leave and to start my own company, which was the plan was for it to be very similar, a label services company, but really trying to champion Australian and New Zealand artists while being based in London. So helping really build a bridge between those two territories with the goal of helping those artists break out faster.
Yeah, so I love the kind of the bridge between Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. It seems like they're fairly related cultures for obvious reasons, but how do you notice a difference in kind of what Australian and New Zealand artists bring compared to what kind of UK born artists are doing?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean the UK, London specifically, where I am, obviously it's just a huge, huge market. I mean, millions of people live here compared to New Zealand, where there's 5 million people across the whole country. So, in terms of the opportunity, both in the types of opportunities that are available for artists, but also just musically, because London is just a melting pot of culture. So there's obviously, you can be absolutely anyone here. In New Zealand, there are, yeah, I'd say like the indie umbrella covers a lot of the music genres in New Zealand. Obviously, there's a lot of every type of other genre as well. But indie and pop are quite a common genre that comes out of New Zealand. So there's also historically the Dunedin sound, which is a sort of era of music in New Zealand. And that's sort of from the 60s, 70s, 80s. And that's really sort of that rock, grunge rock, punk sort of era as well. And I think that that does still sort of like filter into society today as well. So a lot of indie bands, a lot of bands, and it's the same for Australia as well. I don't know about you, but some of my favorite bands have actually come out of Australia.
Sure. Gang of Youths is a recent one, or not that recent, a few years ago for me. But you talk about, London being such a big, diverse market. It must be intimidating for artists that are coming from New Zealand and Australia to break in. Obviously, that's kind of what you're helping them with. I mean, what does that look like? How do you take someone from half the world away and help them find an audience in such a, kind of saturated market?
Yeah, we have this conversation time and time again with New Zealand and Australian artists because, and it's that thing of, big fish, small pond, or small fish, big pond. And in New Zealand and Australia, uh, it's the narrative, the exact line that we get told all the time is that artists hit a ceiling very quickly in terms of opportunity and scope of what's available to them. So on one hand, New Zealand and probably Australia too, it's a really nourishing environment for an artist. There's a lot of, I think people are really sort of accessible that work in the industry. So there's a lot of real nurture and support and encouragement for emerging artists in New Zealand. There's also a lot of grant funding for emerging artists as well, which really does sort of prop up that side of the industry. So in that sense, it is really, really great. But then obviously these artists feel that they've sort of maxed out the opportunities that are available to them in terms of the audience size and, local promotion on the ground. But then they come over to the UK and, they've left everything behind, a huge leap of faith. They've left their family behind and they come to the UK and it's just huge. And suddenly it's that feeling of like, yeah, I'm tiny here. I'm insignificant really, and
Hmm.
all the groundwork that they've done growing their fan base in New Zealand to then come over to the UK, it really does feel like you're starting from the ground up again. So that part is really, really challenging. And that's actually why I created a community over here called Inward Bound. There's a export grant in New Zealand called Outward Sound. So Inward Bound like mirrors people that are leaving. Um, and it's a community of Kiwis that live in London but work in music. And we cover, I'd say there's someone from all different sides of the industry in this community. There's about 100 people now. And that community was started to help these young artists who are coming over and landing in London and just giving them a landing pad. And, we have regular meetups and things so these artists can come to those meetups and come and, speak to people who live and breathe and work in music over here to get all the advice and context and sort of the context that they might need to just get going.
I'm really amazing background. I'm curious about the kind of trajectory of doing the artist services to what you're doing now, right? Like you said, when you started artist services, it was sort of a newish model, and now they're everywhere. But I sense a gesture of sustainability as a theme, right? I mean, I know that that's what we're trying to do with Harmonic. I've been up in my cackles or whatever the right phrase is about feeling that with just this full stop, unfettered capitalism, world that we live in. It's just not compatible. I don't think particularly compatible with anything, but it's certainly not compatible with art, right? And you get this, you productize everything and you strip away the heart, the soul of it. That said, I don't think that sort of just, I mean, the States doesn't have grant programs or anything like that, and I wish we did. But I don't think, full not for profits tend to work as well as they're intended to. And so we're looking for that kind of that middle ground, some sort of sustainability, through the platforms, whatever need to make money to sustain, but just enough, and the rest should go to the artists. And that seemed to be like the gesture of the AWOLs and the others that kind of came out. They're like, well, let's reconfigure. I was cynical about them because I think it's hard to do that at scale, right? But so I'm curious, like, what are you trying to do now, and what did you learn from that first gesture, and like what's the refinement versus that? You've obviously done it successfully, decided to do it something differently, so what's the innovation, like what's the approach now that makes it different and hopefully more sustainable?
Hopefully. Well, Gosh, yeah, setting the scene 2014, 15 when we started Platoon, it was the streaming heyday, it was we were doing 80/20 deals, and this is how we would explain it to artists.
80 to the artist.
Yep, 80 to the.
So for people who don't know, that's an inversion. But I mean, a typical major label deal, it's more like 15. And don't get me started on the recoupment and recouping
uh,
at your royalty rate. So you inverted it. You said, look, we'll take 20%, the artist keeps the 80%, which to me seems like at least a gesture towards coefficient sustainability.
Yeah, yeah, and that's how we would explain it to artists. They'd come through the door and we'd say, look, with us, it's an 80/20 in favor to the artist. If you go to a label, it's going to be flipped around plus the rest. And at the time, we were such a small team, so the services that we really offered were around strategy, distribution, playlist pitching. But even back then, it was, even pitching was more sustainable because you actually, you knew the person who programmed all of the playlists, and they weren't all automated, and there wasn't even a Spotify for artists back end, so it was really like who you knew in the building. So if you knew the right people, you could get on incredible playlists. So it was more of those types of services, a little bit of marketing, a little bit of creative. But then as the team grew, we were able to, expand on the services, and then we really sort of realized, hey, we're actually offering what a label can offer, but with far better economics. So yeah, then as with Platoon, that was also a brand new company, a new model, and so we also adapted as the industry adapted. And we would, if we were putting budgets down for artists, then obviously that would go to us more of a sliding 50/50 in terms of the royalty split. But yeah, always with artists' best interests at heart, and it still is a company like that today. With goodtwin, we, this is about 10 years later, and I just don't believe in the streaming economics anymore.
You and me both. Yeah.
Incredibly hard to try and break artists under the current streaming economics. We work our absolute asses off for these artists, and the income just trickles in. So it's been really, really great for me to leave the safety of a big company and to go out, because I really feel like I've done a masterclass in the last year of what it actually takes to start a label, but to also really understand what the pain points are in the industry and for artists, and what the future might look like. So yeah, I'd say the biggest sort of learnings and the biggest innovations and what in the way that I've been working with artists over this last year is, yeah, I've been saying streamings shouldn't be the metrics that we're looking at. We need to be really building communities around your art and your brand and your music. We need to, really understand where the other opportunities for revenue streams are, obviously through things like merch and being able to play live. And, the more community you have, the more opportunities there are to go and do fan experiences and real life experiences. For all of our artists, we sort of obsess over the number of actual fans that they have that would come and, pay for a ticket or something that they release into the world. And we've
We call
created,
that the most passionate percentile, right?
yeah,
Where it's
that's a
you
great
know,
one.
you kind of have your total addressable market, then your service addressable market, and then the little sliver of that is that most passionate percentile, and then
Yeah.
they're the ones who convert others in. So yeah, I love it. I love what
Yeah. Yeah.
love that approach.
And those are the reliable ones that are going to show up and who are actually going to be able to help you fund your career. So we sort of obsess over this. We have a fan counter with all of our artists, and every time they get, a new email address or a new phone number, or, they can really see someone championing them on social media, then we'll get the artist to reach out and, sort of get to know that fan a little bit. And then we add them to our fan counter. And where we're at in the industry is that right now, yes, everyone is talking about direct to fan. All the major labels are talking about it. They're all building their own systems, but they actually have it easy because all of their artists actually already have audiences. So all they need to do is just say, hey, you've already got 4 million monthly listeners. Why don't we build something cool for your fans? Whereas we're the ones that are trying to help artists get to 100, 300, 500 fans.
The diabolical thing about it is, and I've seen this, I was running Rykodisc when, or I don't know if I was running, I was at Rykodisc when um, artists started developing websites, when websites became a thing, right? And most, if not all of the major labels at first were like, oh, what is it? They do the same thing with any new technology, right? And we, Rykodisc, and it was not my idea, but whoever's idea was like, well, we're going to have a website. And then it quickly went to the majors in the world started to realize the importance of them. Artists didn't know how to do it themselves, right? So then the majors were like, well, we'll build it for you. Of course, what they weren't telling you was they're going to then own the relationship between the customer and the band, not the band itself. And that's exactly what they're going to do now with this direct to fan thing. Oh, well, we can reach them. And at its core, that's the most important relationship that any artist can have. And yet historically and by design, the labels have known that, well, we're going to own the relationship, and that keeps the artists in, at best, some sort of indentured servitude where they're not in control of being able to direct. And so, I'm constantly preaching, Dan and I both, and it's a core value of Harmonics. Like, we don't own the relationship, right? And we're setting up structures so that if we go down, or a company goes away, whatever, here's your data with your fans, right? And there's privacy issues and all that, but the labels have those same privacy issues. You know what I mean? And I just think it's such a core, as I say, value. If you talk about building community and doing it the way you're doing it, which I absolutely love, then the right move there is that you're building it on behalf of the artist, and the artists should be the ones that have the relationship, and you're the conduit. And you just know the labels are not going to do it that way.
Yeah. And actually, James Blake was really loud about that when he left his label,
That
because
vault thing or whatever it was. Yeah.
yeah, yep, and because he realized the hard way, he went independent and then realized he had no access to all of the fan data that he'd built for the last 10 years.
And so I think we're in I'd say violent agreement that streaming does not pay enough, right? And it's not a sustainable revenue generator for artists. But then how do you think about, you're not telling your artists don't use streaming, right? Or don't use social media, right? Another type of platform where you don't own the relationship with your fans, and the return is, it's not kind of a full funnel opportunity for artists. How are you using streaming? How are you using social media to kind of unlock those deeper fan connections, and I assume bring those fans off of those platforms that are kind of rented space?
Yeah, I mean, the way that we talk to our artists about, the Spotify's and the Apple Musics of the world is, use it as a tool. We're not saying don't use it, but just use it for what it's good for. It's a
Top of funnel.
it can be a good discovery tool. You do still get to see some analytics. Your music does randomly end up in Mexico and Jakarta. So, use it for what it is, but let's just not rely on it. As an industry, we've gotten a little bit lazy and just relied on Spotify for the last 10 years to do the marketing for us. And now we're actually back to having to, get creative about how we actually find, nurture, and convert fans. So from a Spotify perspective, we very much are just using it for what it is. It's a discovery tool. It's there to have your music, you can pitch, all that sort of stuff. In terms of social media, the way that we talk about that with artists and being able to really, try and use that to find some of these fans is a few ways. One is that we say, if you see fans that are, or if you see people that are just really engaging and commenting and sort of responding to stories and things like that, that's an opportunity to actually DM that person and let them know that you see them, that you appreciate it. We always say to our artists, this is, what you're doing here, it is a two-way value system. You can't just be saying, listen to my music, listen to my music. You have to actually show that you understand your fans and your audience and, why they might be following you in the first place. So don't be afraid to actually reach out and have some of these conversations in the DMs. And once you've actually built that connection with someone, that could be a fan for life, especially at this early stage. Um,
Yeah. We
and we,
call it
and
an
we
architecture of participation. Sorry, Lucy. I thought you were done. Please finish.
No, I was just going to say we did get a little bit of pushback. One artist said to us, we can't be expected to just go and be best friends with everyone, and we hear that. But as we said, it's a two-way value system. And if you're asking them to care about you, you need to show that you care about them. So even if it's just, a few messages, but the goal of the conversation is also just to get that phone number and that email to be able to say, hey, I'd love to keep you updated with, anything that we're doing in future. We're going to be doing a lot of fan-centric stuff, giving early releases away to supporters, things like that. Then with that goal of actually being able to get the email or the phone number or both, then that, I think once you've got that, that's at least like one step closer to a fan, a real fan.
For sure. And it's interesting you say it's like, no, you can't be best friends and you don't want to create that dynamic. But it's an architecture of participation where the fan feels that he, she, or they are part of the building process of this thing they love. You keep using the word community, and that's the gesture of co-efficiency. It's the gesture of a social contract, to be quite honest, right?
Mm,
Like
yeah.
I think one of the sort of more challenging issues of our time is that the whole notion of a social contract has kind of gone out the window, and we're at this sort of every person for themselves, and how much money you have is your defining sort of attribute, and that's not sustainable, and it's certainly not sustainable for the vast majority of people. And the ethics is about how do we create an environment where there's the greatest opportunity for us all to thrive, right? And we just completely lost it. And I see it, and it trickles down. Like I don't think artists, and I consider myself one, are innately kind of competitive, or at least not zero sum competitive. I think we tend to be more competitive with ourselves, and there's certain, we're all humans. There's jealousy and everything else, but it's not like I have to win or you have to lose so that I can win. And again, I'm old enough to remember the ethos of punk rock and hardcore and even jam bands and to a certain degree hip hop, where it's like we're building something because this is good for us all. That doesn't seem to matriculate into pop, which I don't care about anyway, but it also doesn't seem to matriculate into, so-called like indie rock or whatever, which I find odd. And I wish more people would think about how do we kind of help each other? Like we could not be more in this together. You know what I mean? And it
Yeah.
seems like that's what you're doing.
Yes, yeah, and we say that to our artists, go and find your peers and turn up to their shows and go and, connect with them. You're all going through the same thing, and if you show up for each other, that's also what we mean by community. It's not just your fans, it's actually your peers as well.
I've heard that a lot from artists that we've been speaking to, of how lonely it can feel, because it does, kind of thinking about your New Zealand to UK route of once, that's kind of a microcosm of every artist that is trying to get heard. They're jumping onto the internet, wherever else, trying to be heard, and just being faced with a wall of saturation and uh, maybe not surprise, but still, you know, somewhat unsettled how lonely artists are willing to admit that they are, and how lonely they feel like they're just fighting this battle. Because I think most artists, to George's point, don't necessarily see themselves as, oh, it's me against these other artists in my scene. It's me against the Instagram algorithm, and it's me against the Spotify algorithm. Those are things that are, faceless behemoths that they just can't, that you chip away at over time, and you hope to reach more listeners, versus what you're suggesting, which is this real community-based approach. It takes one fan to say how much they love your music, that I think makes it all worth it to some degree. And that feels so much better than seeing 10,000 streams. If you have 5 fans that say, oh, I really love what you're doing, I want to buy, or I want to go to a show, right? It's crazy how we've just been accustomed to look at the biggest numbers rather than kind of the, emotional and even financial impact. Because 5 people buying, tickets or buying a record is more than 10,000, more revenue than 10,000 people streaming once, right? It's
Yes.
we've really gotten things flipped.
Yeah, we have. The thing I like about the fan tracker as well is that it just does continue to go up. It's not like
And that's a
where
positive
it's pretty
uplift.
volatile.
Yeah. That's really nice. Yeah. So what should if people want to work with you, like what do they need to do to get on your radar? What are you looking for in terms of people you take on? What are the aspirations? Like where do you want Goodtwin to go in the coming years? Like what's your vision?
Honestly, you've caught me at a really interesting time. I've just had this conversation with my team to say right now I just don't feel comfortable just signing artists the way we've been signing artists, just with the way the economics are right now. What I so what we actually have coming up is over the next 2 weeks we have about four whiteboard sessions with artists where we literally do have a whiteboard and whiteboard pens and we all get in a room and I've said to these four different artists, and we're working with them, some in a capacity of just helping with their strategy, for their growth, and others are interested in working with goodtwin and likewise. But I've said to them, I don't believe in the current model, but I really, really want to work with you or help you, figure out this next stage in your career. So let's get into a room, let's get a whiteboard, and let's try and design something together that excites all of us and that makes sense. So, for me, I just want to help artists build sustainable businesses. I'm also just really incredibly tapped into what's going on in the industry right now, and I see right now that ownership, artists really owning their catalog, owning their publishing, that might be actually the most beneficial thing that an artist can do right now in terms of,
Mm.
we're just seeing all these major labels and major finance companies just buying all the pipelines, and buying a lot of catalogs. So,
You see
uh,
Ackman, Bill
yeah,
Ackman?
yeah, wild. Oh, that was not a headline I expected to.
Either. But it does show, and
Yeah,
think of what you will about him, and I have many thoughts, very few of them good. But it shows, to your point exactly, the value of these copyrights.
value of catalog. Yep. And, even I've started to notice that quite a few major artists are now structuring, which I can only presume is they're structuring a legal entity around their artist business and then they're licensing their masters to major labels. So I've seen Yeba, K1, Victoria Monet. I've seen on their P line and on Spotify that it says, that it's under exclusive license to RCA, which makes me think that they're also understanding that really that master ownership is the most powerful position they can be in. So
Problem with that, of course, is you can't do that unless and until you get successful. But I
yes,
mean, I went through this with Reykjavik, where it's like, well, we were never going to get David Bowie or Frank Zappa or Elvis Costello to just sell there wasn't an amount of money, so they would license us the rights to reproduce and distribute for a period of time, and they got it back. But that's because they were David Bowie, Elvis Costello, so I worry that yes, that is the right thing to do for artists, but it's aspirational. They have to hit certain places, and
definitely.
then it also becomes, by the way, if you do sell those things now, unless you're Taylor Swift, and you're not getting them back. You're never going to get them back. So you have to be very strategic about getting to a point of success through companies like yours and hopefully Harmonic and others that can give you that optionality. But it doesn't, just because certain artists are doing that, it doesn't mean that all artists can do that.
No, no, absolutely. But I think wherever possible, artists being in control of their masters, even if it's licensing them for, a certain period of time, like they do when they come to Goodswin, but then having those masters revert back to them, and
Of course.
setting themselves up for the future. I mean, there's just so many incredible artists who have always structured their companies this way, like Georgia Smith, for example, when we worked with her in 2018 her manager was a lawyer previously and just incredibly innovative in the way he thought about the industry and there was just never a doubt in their minds that they weren't ever going to be independent for that very reason I imagine. So yeah, so right now I don't have the answers specifically. I think what I've learned in the last year is that there is just so many incredible, talented artists out there that we would so happily jump to work with if we could work with a lot of artists at scale. And, that would be my dream, to be able to build something that would enable us to somehow give a personalized approach to a lot of artists at once. But yeah, I mean, in terms of what we're looking for, gosh, we're just incredibly excited about the music, the real art, the vision, the drive. If an artist, the best feeling that an artist can give, any music company, is that feeling of they're going to do it with or without me, and I can either sit here and let them go ahead and do it, or I can jump in and get involved and help them get to those goals. So those are the sorts of feelings that I really love experiencing when I meet with an artist. So I don't have the answers, but watch this space. I'm sure we're going to be designing some new ideas and models in the next couple of weeks.
Let's do something together. Like we're shooting for the same thing. We both bow down to the master, who is Ian Moss. We're trying, we're just trying to. This is exactly what I mean. Let's share the information. Let's fight the good fight, because Lord knows a world without independent music and independent art and the possibility of people to sustain while making art is not a world I want to live in.
Likewise.
I want to wrap up with one thing here that I think would be valuable for all artists. On your website, the About page at the end, you say, when artists are all in, we're all in. And I think there's kind of a misconception with artists when they think of, one, artists always seem to have a big question of, like, when do I add team members, right? When do I start collaborating with other people? There's also a misconception that once they have a label services company working with them, or a manager, that they don't have to work as hard. And that's not really true, right? They have to work maybe harder, but it's more effective because you're with someone else. So could you talk a little bit about how you guys look at artists being all in and you being all in?
I actually did write a Substack article last year about this very topic, and the point of the whole article was, if you want anyone to work hard for you, you're going to have to work harder than them. And I kept having conversations with artists who were signed to labels, but they were sort of complaining, oh yeah, they haven't really done anything. And I was time and time again saying to those artists, the best artists that I worked with at Platoon, the previous label, were the artists that, every Monday they'd reach out to us and say, hey guys, what's our plan for this week? It was those artists that kept everyone in line. And by doing so, and there is a sweet spot to being pushy like that. But by doing so, it meant that you were just always thinking about them. You were always like pushing for them. You knew that they were working hard. They had their own to-do list, and together, you'd go and smash out a week. So, what we mean by both of us going all in is exactly that. It needs to be a true partnership. We will show up and we will work into the evening. We'll do whatever we can to help you succeed, but we need you pushing as well, and doing the exact same. And thankfully our artists are like that. They do get that.
Such a great ethos.
I used to say all the time when I was running the label, if I find myself working harder on behalf of your career than you're working on your career, we have to have a conversation.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a pleasant one,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I have worked with many artists where that exact thing happens. You work harder than them. You want it more than they do. That's not a very fun feeling.
Well, where can people find more from you if people want to seek you out or learn about what you're doing, or just look forward to the inevitable model breaking economics you're going to come up with?
Yeah. So we're on Instagram as goodtwin official, and we're also on Substack as goodtwin official as well. Substack's where you'll find me probably being the most honest, because I'm quite transparent about this journey that I'm on, and the way I'm thinking about the industry. And I think Substack's also just an amazing platform, an amazing community, and a lot of great people there that I also follow and glean really good information from. So I would say meet me there. We also actually do a drop into our DMs every Thursday where emerging artists can come in and say hello and ask us questions for the price of buying us both a coffee. Um, because yeah, and that's so great. Every Thursday we get people, we get quite regularly people dropping in every Thursday to give us an update on the week before and just asking us about career advice and what they should do next. So
That's cool.
I invite any artist to
So
join us
great.
there as well.
Lucie, thank you very, very much. And again,
Thank
I
you.
sincerely hope we can collaborate. We're all trying to do the same thing. But thank you so much for your time and your expertise and for tilting at the right windmills.
Thank you.